Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Wednesday. It's fairly cloudy, but it's a wonderful Wednesday. It's episode 54. 54? Yes, it is 54. It's Allister, it's Geoff, and it's the Real Deal Pod. We're so happy to have you guys back here with us. Oh, man, I know it was a crazy week. Geoff and I have just been offline actually talking for a little while. We're like, oh man, we got to jump into the pod talking about what's gone on. Oh man, I hope the world is settled for all of you and we are well equipped and I think well settled for a smoother, as smooth as can be next few years. Geoff, my friend, how you doing? How you feeling?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's Wednesday. We're on hump day.
Yeah.
It's the weather is supposed to be getting nicer for the weekend. Business is business. Life is life.
Oh, and my mom came in town yesterday. I picked her up from the airport. Grandma C came in from Winnipeg.
Yeah, how's she
Yeah,
doing?
she's doing wonderful. She's happy to be back here with the grandkids. And she left Grandpa at home. So
Hit the kitchen yet?
no, oh no, but you know what she did? She brought a big case of cookies.
Nice.
Yeah, that was wonderful. No, so yeah, Michelle and my mom have actually gone out to the grocery store. So they will be hitting the kitchen, yes, when they get home.
Love
So
it.
excited.
Love it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so we had our election, everybody, and we now know that I think it ended up as a minority. Actually it was close to a majority, but we have a minority liberal government. I know there are some people that are upset out there. I do have a lot of friends that are upset. I'm a glass half full type of person. I think that we are in good hands, to be honest with you, for the next 4 years. And as I've been joking around with some of my conservative counterparts, let's let him do his job. Let him get our country back on track. And then next elections, we'll take over and take it from there. Let's let him do his job. Let's let him get on track. I think we have the thoughtful mind. I think we have the measured tone. I think we have the right person um, to have the discussions, the tough discussions that need to happen. And I think us as Canadians just have to focus on becoming that, on just being Canadians again. Because the message that I want everybody to really remember is everything that has been going on for the past, man, it's been 9 years, 10 years, it feels like. The message has always been about hate and divisiveness, and it's been intentional. And the reason why Donald Trump continues to talk about us becoming the 51st state and is spewing on Truth Social when we had our elections, to telling us as Canadians to vote for him instead of any of the leaders that we had running in Canada. I just want everybody to know that it is calculated. It is to continually divide Canadians against one another and to divide Republican or conservatives against liberals, against NDPs, and not even allowing us as Canadians to even understand how our political parties work anymore. And I'm not going to get into it because it's a long discussion. Geoff and I got into it beforehand. I just want everybody to remember, we as people, we are Canadians. Us as people, our duty is to get along with one another, to support one another, to purchase locally, and to build our Canadian economy, to allow our elected officials to do the job that we've entrusted them to do, no matter what banner we believe in. That is my plea to Canadians on this, the start of our new journey. That's it. That's my PSA for that, Geoff.
Well, my PSA is let's see what happens.
Let's ride. but with
Saddle
that,
up.
but with that being said, I actually wanted to talk about one of the biggest programs though that are that is now being talked about. I guess we can discuss it now, and it's the BCH. What was it? The BCH program, the Build Canada Homes program, and it's the biggest mandate, and it's at the front and center of the Liberal Party's helm. It's the Liberal mandate, and it's at the helm of Mark Carney's at Mark Carney's forefront, and it's very bold. Everybody, it's the national push to get Ottawa back into direct home building, and it's actually inspired by our own housing strategies. So the only criticism that I have, I know it's not a criticism, it's a watch out that I have. And this is the conservative part out of me, so everybody can see me floating back into my natural colors, is normally housing has been a provincial thing. And that's the one part that I think we as Canadians have never understood. Housing is a provincial thing. So when we've always complained that the government isn't interjecting, the federal government isn't interjecting into our housing, it was because they couldn't. And anything that they did would have to have repercussions across any other country, any other province, I beg your pardon. So now that the federal government is going to be getting involved in our housing, there is a little bit of trepidation that it will cause federal bottlenecks in terms of our building. And I think the right questions that we need to be asking now is this going to become a new will housing become a new federal agency? Because it's not now, right? I think we need to be asking ourselves, are there going to be grants to the provinces now coming from the feds? Because normally the grants have always been provincial, right? So now will the grants become federal rather than provincial? And then is there going to be a public and private partnership? And I think that is the biggest thing that we have to worry about too, is developers need to have a voice in this program. This cannot be as much as the Liberal government has our best interests at heart with this new program. I think it's going to be amazing. We do need to make sure that the communication between the public and private sector is clear and consistent. I think that is the biggest thing. We need the Liberal Party to not bulldoze our developers in this initiative. Because we do have construction leaders on board, because there's a new incentive that they're looking at bringing back out that was big in the 70s and 80s, called the MURB tax incentive. And I had to go back over because I was born in 77, so I wasn't really familiar with this. But the MURB stands for the multi-unit residential building. So it was a tax incentive that originally ran back in the 1970s and 80s, and apparently it worked. So if you are an investor who builds or buys a qualifying rental building, the MURB built program lets you write off key expenses like depreciation, interest, and construction costs against your other income. That means a lower overall tax bill and a stronger financial reason to invest in rental housing. So that, I thought, was a super cool underlying incentive that is being thought to being brought back to investors with this new Build Canada Build program. So really interesting. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about this one offline. And you used, I think this is going to be amazing, but I don't know if that is the right word.
Maybe amazing is not the right word. Yeah, maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit.
Because right now here in BC, let's be honest, we have a lot of inventory. This is all about affordable housing, right? With developers, if you talk to many developers, they are hurting like they've never hurt before. There is a lot of pre-sales that aren't completing because what those people have purchased it at to what the fair market value is as of today. Again, those borrowers are walking away.
Yep.
Now these developers have these units that can't complete. They have other units that they haven't sold that yet can't complete. And now they have really no option, if they are now completing on a development, to turn it into a rental opportunity through the development company, right?
Right.
And I think in that, and we talked a little bit about this offline, and you can put some light to it, that also our federal government is imposing, with affordability in housing, our federal government may be opposing a 20%.
Oh, the involuntary zoning law, or yeah, the zoning rules.
Exactly.
That's actually provincial though. That's
Oh, that's
not
provincial.
federal, provincial. So there it is. So that's actually what I was gonna kind of go with. That's actually been the problem with the real estate being dictated provincially. So the problem, British Columbians, is our issue, aside really from Toronto, which it actually isn't even as bad out there, right? It doesn't get felt anywhere else. And so we like to joke around as a society and criticize the Liberal government for our housing problems and all of that sort of stuff. And somehow, again, it morphed federally. The Liberal government provincially put us in a problem. Christy Clark, and before that, Gary Sillinger was the dude that was the premier here, put us in this spot. The Liberal government of British Columbia put housing in British Columbia in this predicament. And so now what has to happen, whether it had been the Conservative Party that won, whether it had been the NDPs that won, whether it had been the Green Party that won, whether it is now the Liberal Party that has won, the fact that it now gets attached federally means that BC is going to have to feel probably the sharpest correction, because the Liberal government that the British Columbians elected allowed what was well known, even in the United States, the Wild West of real estate investment in Canada. Mm-hmm. And everybody in British Columbia has to admit to that. And I think that that's the part that we in British Columbia like to skip over, is we don't take culpability for where we allowed this to get. So now with these things going in place, this affordable housing does have to come. These developers, unfortunately, do have to get corrected before they can start making money again. It does have to happen, because we've allowed stuff to get out of control. It does have to correct, right?
So to kind of put it into a little box here, explain to everybody as far as what is going on, what is probably going to be happening, and who it's going to affect out of pocket.
So just so we are now in the midst of the federal government getting involved, right? Getting involved federally in our housing programs, right? In our housing. So who does it affect? Everybody. It affects you as a mortgage, as a lender. It affects me as a realtor. It affects developers, right? And it affects our public, right? Our public, hopefully, are going to get cheaper homes. Hopefully, our economy, our housing economy is going to correct, right? Real estate agents, it's going to get busy for us. Developers, they're going to feel a pinch, possibly, if they don't react appropriately, right, to their changing model. And that's the other part, I think, that if you're a developer, if you are an investor, you have to think to yourself, the model's changed, so my model has to change. If I'm going to sit and complain about the model changing and not change, then it's my fault that these bad things happen. But if you look, if we have a lot of inventory in Vancouver from a condo standpoint hitting the market. We've discussed that. That is because investors already knew that was coming, released those investments, and turned their money into multi-unit residential properties already. So that's what I mean. They already made those transitions knowing the model was changing, right? So that's what I mean. These little incentives and all of that sort of stuff, these are good things that are going to happen to developers. Good things are going to happen to us as real estate professionals. Good things are going to happen to lenders because they're going to have more mortgages to hand out, and good things are going to happen to people because we're going to have affordable housing. I think that's the utopia that we're looking for, that we're looking towards. There will be some trials and tribulations. People's pockets are going to get hurt. Yes. Are there stuff like where we were talking about, where was it? The inclusionary zone, where 20% of a rental build has to be priced at sub rental market rates, right? Yes, some of those developments are going to get hurt. There is going to be a correction process, but over the long period of time, I think that we're going to be in a good spot, a better space than we are right now.
Yeah, and I think as you say that, I think moving forward, everybody's model needs to change.
That's it.
But I'm also thinking about models that haven't changed on these developments that are just coming to a close now, right, or a completion now, and or those that are have yet to complete. You know, those developers are really taking it.
That is, yeah.
And when we talk about these inclusionary zones, and because these developments that either are going to complete, but still have tons of units that are available because investors have walked away from them,
yeah,
or they were unable to sell due to the market. As a developer closing a development, the only thing that they're able to do is turn these into rental developments or a rental capacity through the development or through the developer. And if they are in part of this inclusionary zone, 20% of that
building,
development
yeah,
has to be below fair market value.
yeah.
And then when you're doing the math on top of all the development costs,
50%.
developers could lose up to 50% of their investment.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and that's the hurt that we said people are going to have to take in the initial. Yeah, but no, it's thing. So it's just the same thing. It's the same conversation that they're having in the States. Walmart, we talked about it before. Walmart, Target, everybody sat Trump down saying we are in the midst of empty shelves and all of that sort of stuff. The United States, I was listening to something actually on Fox, and they were actually talking about how many retailers have already started planning with their bankruptcy lawyers, knowing that Christmas they will be bankrupt because they won't have anything on the shelves, right? All of these changes, what I'm saying, all of these things that are perceived as good things, right? They do have an immediate pain to somebody bigger, 100%. So developers are going to hurt because affordable housing for the little person to get middle class people their homes back, developers have to take less, 100%. Somebody has to lose. But for the longest time, the middle class has, unfortunately. We allowed ourselves, and again, when we allowed, and this is where I talk about globalism, right? Globalism allowed us to evaporate the middle class. That's what happened. So we as I'm not a British Columbian, I'm a Manitoban, I'm a British Columbian now, so I'll include me in this. We as British Columbians saw money with markets opening to us, people from other countries wanting to invest into the British Columbia, and we decided to take the money. And we decided to participate in what was called globalism. Well, now globalism has reared its ugly head. And it's shown what it can do when now a leader that doesn't like globalism attacks globalism and forces us back into nationalism and relying on ourselves. Now we don't have the means to support those inflated things that globalism brought, I beg your pardon. So now we as nationalism focusing back on Canadian values and bringing it back to Canada as a country have to feel some pain. The big people have to feel some pain so that the little people, that middle class, can come back and begin churning our economy again like they did before globalism impacted our country. Because that's what it used to do. Middle class was the thing that drove our country.
Yeah.
We don't have it anymore. So we have to bring it back. In order for that to happen, the higher end of our society has to come down. They have to lose.
Yeah. Yep. And they are. And
they are. That's it. They are. And I'm sorry, I don't actually have pity. As much as a conservative as I am, I don't actually have that much pity on it. Because for the longest time we've lived a good life. Right? And the thing is, if you think smartly, right, you have to swing the pendulum back all the other way to nationalism, right? So that when we get back to the center, we'll have a better idea how to manage nationalism and globalism together in order to really, really grow as a country. Because we would have had the learnings from one and again the learnings from the other. And if we have smart leadership, right? If we have leadership with foresight and thought, right? We can have those things.
Well, like I said when we started this, let's see
We'll
what
see.
happens.
We'll see. Yeah, man. What do you got for us today? That was a lot, dude.
Yeah, that was a lot, but I wanted to circle back from our last pod when we were talking about fixed rates, variable rates. The common question that we get as a mortgage broker, what is your best rate is the first question. Second
Yeah.
question is, well, should I do a fixed or a variable? On the real estate side is like, how much is my house worth? And then, or how much can I buy it for? And then, well, what are the rates? So like we promised on our last pod, we explained the types or how many rates that there can be,
The buckets, baby.
the buckets that they fall into or that you may fall into, and what that rate is determined. But as promised, we wanted to come back to what is a fixed rate, what is a variable rate, what are the pros and cons, and what should I do? Should I choose fixed or should I choose variable, right?
I guess that would actually be a pretty big question actually going on right now with the uncertainty of everything that's going on, right? We don't know. We just had rates pause. Are they going to say, hey, we might need to increase them next one? Or are we going to need to drop them? Or are we going to stay the same?
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to our next Bank of Canada meeting, which is in June, I think 66% of economists believe we're going to see a drop, right?
Yes, I believe we're dropping too.
But this is actually a good interlude to that June meeting. But I think it's also really important to understand, like again, like what is a fixed rate? What is a variable rate? How is a fixed rate affected? What dictates it? What dictates a variable rate? But I wanted to get into the 101s of it, like nothing too deep and complex, trying to keep it simple and really kind of getting people to understand, the difference between a fixed, a difference between a variable, what affects each, what are the pros and cons, and really, what should you do, right? Like I often say, when people, should I do fixed or variable? Well, some people like their steak rare, some people like it well done. So everybody is a little bit different as far as what they're going to choose because everybody's situation is a little bit different. So what I might do or what you might do, Allister, might not be the right thing for your neighbor to do or your partner to do, right? So I wanted to get into like what is a fixed rate, right? A fixed rate, really, to keep it very simple, is an interest rate that remains the same throughout the term of your loan. And remember, folks, when you do a mortgage, when you're doing a fixed rate mortgage, you can do anywhere from a 1 year term to a 10-year term. Okay. Unlike the United States, where you can do a 25-year term,
Yeah.
a 30-year term, and a 35-year term. Here in Canada, you can do anywhere from a 1 year to a 10-year term. And if you do say the most common, which we'll say is a 3-year fixed term right now, previous to that was a 5-year fixed term. What that really means, if you choose a fixed rate, is that your interest rate remains the same through the term of your loan.
Can I ask a question, Jeff? Because you just mentioned like the vast disparity in the length of the terms versus Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that?
I don't know. I don't understand the financing side of the United States. I think if you take a look at the statistics of Canada, as far as how many people do take a 10-year term, it's very, very few.
Right.
So
What is the pro of a 25-year term?
Well, in the United States, if you took a 25-year term at the peak of its lowest rate, so
Oh yeah.
some of us that have an interest rate of, in that ones or that high ones or that 2%,
True.
geez, I would take a 45-year term,
True.
right? So that would be the advantage of it. But again, the likelihood of someone really fulfilling a 25-year term, say in the United States, and again, I don't know the statistics, is highly unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
Using Canadian statistics, if the common knowledge is that if 70% of us are breaking our mortgage term within the first 3 years, it wouldn't make sense to do a 25-year term. That's why when you take a look at today's rate environment, a lot of us are taking 3-year terms or 5-year terms, and that's largely due to basically the environment that we're currently in, right? And also the strategies. There's some brokers out there that firmly believe a 2-year term is the way to go because
I was going to say that I know during the rebound when the rates were rising rapidly, that was one of the suggestions that I was hearing brokers suggesting was go with 2 years if you could afford it.
Yeah, because again, it gauges that economic environment a little bit better, right? In today's rate environment, people are doing 3-year terms because they feel that our rates are going to correct within the next 12 to 36 months. And then we're getting people back on that 5-year term now because rates are coming down into a level where they're a little bit more comfortable. They're not as bad as what they were. They're not as great as what they were, but they're happy as far as where they're landing. And they just want stability. They just want to know what they're paying each and every month because we are coming out of a rate environment that has been such a roller coaster ride. And people, again, just want to set it and forget it with a rate that they're comfortable with, right? So when we talk fixed rates, again, guys, it's always important to understand that your fixed rates are dictated by the bond market, which is based on what's going on outside of our Canadian borders. So when we hear about these tariffs, when we hear about how our world economy is becoming unstable because of these tariff announcements or these upcoming tariffs, again, if the world economy is unstable, your fixed rates will remain low.
Right.
If the world economy strengthens, our fixed rates will rise. And here is the reason why. When our world economy is unstable, people will take their money out of the markets. They will stick it into bond yields where things are safe. And when people start sticking money into the bond yields where they're safe, you're going to see fixed rates go lower. Just like when the world market is going crazy, and it's going good and people are feeling good about what's going on, Outside of our Canadian borders, people then stick money into the stock market because that's where their greatest return on investment are going to be. They take it out of the bond yields because, again, yields are safe and secure. They're not offering a greatest return on investment. And then when that happens, you're going to see our fixed rates rise. So right now, there's a lot of people, a lot of economists, because our world economy right now is unstable, that means our fixed rates are going to basically remain low or continue to go lower, depending on what's going on outside of our Canadian borders.
Yeah.
That's a real bird's eye view of it.
Perfect.
Now, a variable rate, guys, again, is what's going on inside our Canadian borders, right? If we are going into a recession, and again, with these upcoming tariffs yet to be decided as far as what that's going to look like, if you take a look at our inflation rate, if you take a look on what is going on within the Canadian borders, and really, again, because now we have a government that is elected, now we have a prime minister that has saddled up, we're going to get a better understanding as far as what's going to happen inside our Canadian borders. But again, there's a large consensus to say that Canada right now is in a recession. Mm-hmm. Or Canada is going to be coming into a recession. And if that is the case, when we talk about variable rates, that's a good thing, because what the Bank of Canada needs to do then is they need to reduce the overnight lending rate, which has a direct impact on our prime rate, and it will become lower and lower and lower because it will stimulate buying. The only way to get out of a recession is to stimulate it by spending money and getting us to where we need to be. So when we talk about the Bank of Canada, understand that the Bank of Canada has 8 fixed dates each year where it basically takes a look at the overnight lending rate, right? Our next Bank of Canada meeting, I believe, is June 6th, yes. Right? So when we talk about variable rates, depending on what's going on within our Canadian borders, depending on if we are in a recession or where we're at with our inflation rate, we will see our overnight lending rate either decreasing to stimulate buying to get out of the recession, or you're going to start to see an increase to slow everything down. Now, again, when our Canadian economy is weak or unstable, we're going to see that overnight rate go low. Right? And again, when the Canadian economy is strong, we're going to see that overnight lending rate increase. So most economists are believing that our variable rate, our overnight lending rate, is going to continue to drop, which is great news for variable rate mortgage holders.
Yes.
Right?
To get comfortable again, because it was an uncomfortable ride for a good year and a half.
Right. And then people then will say, well, what are the pros and cons of a fixed rate? Because people will always say, well, what is the benefit of each? Like they understand, or our whole purpose is here is to understand, okay, hey, to keep it really simple, your fixed rates are dependent upon what's going on outside of our world or outside of our Canadian borders, and what's going on with our bond yields. Keeping it simple. Our variable rate is going to be dictated by what's going on inside our Canadian borders. Are we in a recession? Are we in a strong, stable economy? That's going to dictate if our variable rate is going to go up or down.
Right.
Now, some of the pros of a fixed rate is you have stability for the term of your mortgage. Again, anybody who was in a variable rate mortgage, understands that our Bank of Canada increased our overnight lending rate 8 times in a matter of 11 months. And if you were a variable rate mortgage holder, there was no stability there. Versus
every variable rate, not every one of us, but most variable rate mortgage holders that loved and pounded the pavement and touted the benefits and to have them all the time for a good year and a half, cursed them and said, this is ridiculous. Who does this nonsense?
Well, and in saying that, again, if you were to ask those same people that are cursing them 6 months before or even a year before, hey, do you think that the variable rate is going to increase 8 times in 11 months? Most people would tell you to drop you drop on your head. And the other ones that said, yeah, I can see that happen, would have been labeled a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah.
So with fixed rates, again, some of the pros is that there's stability for the term of the mortgage, and there is no change to the payment each and every month.
No, Jeff, sorry, Jeff, I want to interrupt one quick second because I got a question to ask. Because we've talked about rates, and one of the things I think, because we have people constantly watching rates. I'm waiting for rates to go down. I'm waiting for rates to go down.
Yeah.
Now, have we somehow told people what the perfect rate is, and that's what they're waiting and watching for? Because because everybody, I've always had, like, growing up in life, different people tell me what, quote unquote, the perfect rate is. Oh, Allister, the perfect rate is 2%. If you've got a mortgage rate of 2%, that's a perfect rate. You're good. You never have to worry about anything. That's what you want. You're good. Right? I think that is maybe something we need to stop doing, because my true belief is there isn't a perfect rate. That's why I choose a variable, because I'm just happy when it's normally low and I'm good. Right? I don't need the fixed part, and because I don't believe there is a perfect rate. I believe it's what you can afford.
I think when people speak about a perfect rate, I think that that perfect rate will change depending on the year that you're in, the cost of
Sure.
living, everything that falls along with that.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, what is a perfect rate? I think it's relative to what is that rate environment at that time. Because
Right.
if the perfect rate is 2%, we're not going to get that perfect rate, right? I don't believe we're going to see a 2% fixed rate again, or in the very near future. So if people are spitting off, hey, this is the perfect rate, well, the perfect rate might be unrealistic, right?
That's what I think. I think it's a crazy thing to be asking about.
So again, when it comes to what is a perfect rate, it comes down to, well, what is your affordability? It comes down to, again, the stress test and what happens if those rates go sideways and all of a sudden that rate increases by 2%. And this is what the stress test has done. It's protected you as the borrower, as well as the lender, is that, hey, if times do become turbulent, you are getting qualified at 2% higher than what your contract rate's going to be. And then basically understanding that back in the day, that affected people's purchasing power by 25%, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So again, to answer that question, what is a perfect rate? If 2% is that perfect rate, well, if you're waiting for it in order to buy a house, you're going to be waiting for a very long
Very
time.
long time. And that's why I wanted to touch on that, because I think that is the one message that we need to continue to deliver to people, that there is no perfect rate. So watching and saying I'm waiting for the rates to come down, it's something that sometimes short circuits my brain, because it's a hard one to help people understand that COVID, again, much like the real estate process and just how real estate, kind of the sequence of real estate ran. I think that people have a misnomer now on mortgage rates and what they should look like, all the time. People are used to everything should be below one, waiting for it to
Well,
be 1.8.
and let's even keep in mind too, like even when those rates were at that mid ones or mid twos, what was your purchase price? Right?
That's exactly it.
So what was your mortgage payment on a 2% mortgage with property values being 22% higher than they are now, versus what is your mortgage payment on a low 4 to a mid 4 to where property prices are now? It's
Yes.
probably very, very similar. So is that perfect rate 2%? Well, what was the market value at that point?
That's exactly it. When we were at the mid one, like you said, when we were at 1.5, I'll use an Abbotsford East home. When we were at 1.5%, an Abbotsford East home was going for $1.7 million. When we were at 4%, that Abbotsford East home was $1.4 million.
Yeah. 1.3 million?
1.4.
Yeah. So a $300,000 variance.
$300,000 decrease.
So again, what is that perfect rate? To me, it's what is your affordability?
Right. Exactly.
Um, And some of the cons of a fixed rate are this, like a fixed rate is typically higher than a variable rate. This is one of the very few times that fixed rates are actually lower than the variable rates. But again, let's have that conversation in 6, 12, 16, 24 months.
Yeah.
Some of the cons of a fixed rate is that if you break the term of your mortgage, you're going to be charged what they call the interest rate differential, right? And usually your interest rate differential, and again, this is a very kind of low level as far as what the penalty is going to be, is typically about 4.7% of what your remaining mortgage balance is. Is that a hard number to work by? Absolutely not.
Yeah. So many people were paying out that penalty during COVID. They didn't care. That penalty was so
what I say is, like, people will say, well, what is going to be my penalty to break my fixed rate? Like, what is the interest rate differential going to be?
Oh,
And just a low level number, like just kind of keeping it really simple, a lot of people would say, well, take your mortgage, times it by 4.7%. That's going to be what your mortgage penalty is going to be ish. Now, that's a very ish. Obviously, if you are in a fixed rate, and depending on the amount of time left in your fixed rate, that's not going to be an accurate number. I always tell people, if you want an ish number, take 4.7%, times it by the balance of your mortgage. But again, to truly know, contact your lender, ask them what the penalty would be to break the mortgage, and that's going to give you what you need to know. So again, some of the cons with the fixed rate mortgage, Allister, is that your fixed rates typically are going to be higher than your variable. This is one of the few times that it's not. If you break a fixed rate mortgage, your penalty is going to be much higher than if you're in a variable rate, because it's called that interest rate differential. What is my interest rate? How many months do I have left on my term of my mortgage? What is the interest? What is my interest rate that I'm paying now? What is the interest rate as far as at the time that I break it? What is that calculation left for the amount of months left on my mortgage? And again, a number that you can use loosely is 4.7% of the mortgage balance. Gives you probably a little bit of a worst case scenario than a best case scenario, but it also will give you an idea.
Always best to have an idea, and always best to have the worst case scenario, because if you fall underneath, you're a happy person.
Absolutely. Now, again, some of the pros and cons of a variable rate. Some of the pros of a variable rate is typically and historically a variable rate is lower than a fixed rate, right?
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, a variable rate has always outperformed a fixed rate for the last 40 years. If we use that statistic for the last 5,
Forget COVID.
Yeah. And also with the variable rate, this is what a lot of people don't understand, is that you can, if you are in a variable rate, you can lock into a fixed rate at any point of your mortgage at no cost, right? And another pro of a variable rate is that if you break your mortgage, if you're in a variable rate, it's a 3-month interest penalty. So a much lower penalty cost than if you're in a fixed. Yeah. Now, some of the disadvantages of a variable rate is your rate will change as the Bank of Canada adjusts the prime. And remember, how many Bank of Canada meetings do we have each and every year to take a look at that?
10.
8.
8 years with 10 announcements.
Right. So again, depending on where we're at and using, the last 2 years where we had 8 increases in the last 11 years or last 11 months, your payment was fluctuating up. And again, a very, very scary time for people that were holding a variable rate mortgage. Mm-hmm. And again, also as your prime rate goes up, your amount of your mortgage payment that's getting allotted to the interest to the principal will also vary, right? So this is where if you were in a variable rate mortgage and our variable rate went up 8 times in 11 months, a lot of that mortgage payment now was going towards the interest versus the principal. And that's when we were talking about trigger rates and trigger points, right?
Right.
So here's the thing. Should I do fixed or should I do variable? Okay. It's really subjective. This is where I go back. Do you like your steak medium? Do you like your steak medium rare? do you like your steak well done? Because everybody is not the same. So really, if you choose a fixed or a variable, it's really a personal kind of question. And it's also important to understand, what is your tolerance? What is your anxiety levels like, right? How are you triggered by what you hear and what people are saying? Because if you are triggered and you're highly anxious, maybe a variable rate isn't the best for you. If you like to kind of set it and forget it and really kind of have a great understanding as far as what your payment is going to be each and every month, fixed rate may be the rate for you. Again, variable rates are historically lower than a fixed rate. So again, a lot of times people love the variable rate because they understand, historically speaking, it has outperformed the fixed rate. Even with variable rates higher right now than a fixed rate, people who are choosing variable rates are saying, hey, I believe that within the next Bank of Canada meetings, within the next 12, 24 months, I believe where our Canadian economy is going to be, I believe that variable rates or our prime rates are going to continue to decline. And maybe my variable rate right now is, again, is what is it going to be? Say at 4%, but within the next 12 months, with the overnight lending rate decreasing because our Canadian economy is where it's going to be at, that 4% might turn into a 3% within the next 12 months. And that is what I'm willing to kind of bank on, and that's what I'm going to do, right? And then there's other people that say, hey, I'm good with either or. Tell me what you think is the best thing to do. So there's a thing that I'd like to refer called the 50 basis points rule. So right now we take a look at fixed rates. The best fixed rate out there right now, let's just say it's 3.84. The best variable rate out there right now is about 4.04. Again, depending on which bucket you're dropping into, you do simple math. If that simple math from the fixed rate to the variable rate is below 50, there's a very good argument to say go with a variable. If it's less than 50, sorry, the best option is to do a fixed rate.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay, that's
below 50.
Below 50, yeah, and then if it's above 50, yeah, it's variable, right? Yeah.
It's variable, right? So in this case, if you're like, hey, what should I do? I'm good with either a fixed or a variable. Then we educate you on the 50 basis point rule. Okay, your best fixed rate right now is 3.84. Your best variable rate right now is 4.04. You do the simple math, and if the difference is less than 50, again, do a fixed rate. If the difference is greater than 50, then maybe you want to do a variable rate, right? So that's called the 50 basis point rule. So at the end of the day, though, again, it comes down to tolerance. Just understand what a fixed rate is, understand what a variable rate is, understand the pros and cons, and really understand your tolerance level, right? And again, a lot of us who have mortgages, and again, keep in mind, 80% of Canadians' mortgages are renewing here by 2026. That means anybody that has had a variable rate in the last 5 years is a little bit cautious to continue to go with that variable rate because of what they've gone through. It's like being in a horrible relationship.
Yeah, PTSD.
Basically, now you're finally breaking up and you're like, do I really want to get in that same kind of relationship that I was once in? Maybe I want to do the safe route this time, right? And go on the fixed side. Where there's others that say, you know what? Hey, been in this relationship, it didn't work out. I'm going to grow wise in that. I understand where it went sideways, and I understand, hey, I'm willing to basically move forward in a similar relationship because I'm a little bit more educated in it, or things now look a little bit different, right?
Yep. This is the way I choose to look at it. The only other time we had something like COVID was the Spanish flu. So the only rebound that we will probably not see another correction like that for another 130 years, and so I won't be alive. So I'm still a big believer in variable rates. That's why we just saw something that happens every 130 years. I think I don't see it happening any that ever happening again.
And here's my attitude that on you never know what's going to happen,
No.
right?
Yeah.
Like you never know what's going to happen. No one projected COVID to happen when it did. No one projected the effects of what COVID did. In the real estate side of things, in the interest rate side of things. But I'm also a big believer in history, right? I feel that history will always repeat itself. It's secular or circular or
It
whatever,
is.
however you want to put it.
Yeah.
And to your point, COVID was a one-off, right?
Yeah.
Historically speaking, we don't see a lot of world events like COVID that have impacted economies like COVID did, right?
Right.
Like you, Alistair, I'm a variable rate guy. I understand rates, but I'm saying my mother is not a variable rate person or shouldn't be a variable rate person.
Right.
She needs to understand what her payment is each and every month. She's 70 plus years old. She's highly anxious.
Yep.
And again, if she wasn't a variable rate, even if the affordability was there, even if the monthly payment was lower, she couldn't handle the possible fluctuations,
The anxieties.
and the
Right.
anxiety. So again, for her or people like that, we would more have a stronger conversation on a fixed rate and why it's better for that particular person.
But that's what I love, and that's why again we talk about why it's so important to be speaking with a professional that's going to educate you. Because what works for you isn't necessarily going to work for Susie or John that told you to go in and see. See, Susie and John might say, "Oh, this is what I do, and you got to do the same. And if you don't do the same, you're crazy. You'd be crazy to do something different." And then when you walk in and you sit down with somebody and they tell you, well, if you do what Susie and John do, you're done. Like you'll be in a whole heck of a lot of trouble because that won't work for you.
Yeah.
Right. And this is why, and this is what we need to do for you instead, so that you can have that same feeling that Susie and John did.
Yeah.
Right. So now that Susie and John, when they come back and they say, well, are you doing the same thing we did? And then you say, oh, no, I'm not doing that. That would have killed me. You can explain to them why. Right? The why you're not doing it, because my situation is different, da, 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 and this is what I'm doing instead, da, 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 da. If you speak to the wrong person and you go and do what Susie and John did, and that person just says, okay, Susie and John did this, stamp. There you go.
Yeah.
Yourself in a lot of peril. And that's why it's so important to understand that when it comes to getting a mortgage, when it comes to buying a house, it is a personal journey. They're like snowflakes, man. Not one is the same. I promise you. Right. And so it has to be treated as such. So anytime you're talking to somebody, if they make you feel like you're a commodity, if they make you feel like your journey is the same as the one they just spoke to you about, then they are not doing you justice. They are not doing you service, because it shouldn't be the same. You are an individual. You are a human being. Now, circumstances may be similar, but when it comes down to the essence of your needs, that is when it's individual, and that's when it shouldn't be the same.
Yeah. And also to add to that is asking those qualifying questions. Like if you are working with people that aren't asking you qualifying questions, that's a big red flag.
Right? No, it's a serious thing, because there's some people that will say, like, I didn't even get asked like how long I've been at my job for.
Yeah.
Well, that's a big question, because if you've only been at your job for 2 months, you're not getting approved. Like, come on now.
Well,
Right?
you might get approved.
Well, maybe, I guess. But that's because Jeff's an experienced professional. But that's what I mean. Like, traditionally, people that haven't been at their job for 3 months don't really qualify for approval, because they need to complete the probationary period. Right? So if somebody's telling you, no, you'll be fine. Well, in most circumstances, you're not. So you're speaking to the wrong people. So again, ask those qualifying questions, like Jeff said. Like, it's crazy.
Yep. Yep. Well, that's it.
That's it, man. I think we did this pod justice today. We got fixed rates, variable rates. We got a PSA for listen, people, let's enjoy the Canada that we have. Let's work together on building together a stronger, united Canada. Let's remember that this is our country, nobody else's. Let's love it. Let's enjoy it, and let's make it one of the leaders in all of the world. I loved what Carney had to say. If the US doesn't want to lead, then we will. I think that was the most beautiful message in the world for all of us as Canadians to work together to become the leaders of the world. Because if there's one thing I can say, this country is legitimately the greatest one in the world. I always say Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I'm from, the greatest city in the world, right? I say Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada is the greatest country in the world. And that is how we need to band together. That is now how we need to behave. We are better than everybody else. You know, loosely speaking, let's be kind about it, but knowing in our hearts, we do things right. Right? That's what I got to say. And with that being said, man, we're going to wrap it up. We'll be back here next Sunday for episode 55. I think we might, do we have a guest that day? Are we going to have the guest back that day, or do we not?
I think it's on the 21st.
21st. All right. We will have a guest. Well, we will be back here with you. The guest is on the 21st. Thank you guys so much for listening. Continue to love us, like us, share us. Again, we hope we are delivering you guys as much content as we possibly can to make sure that you are well equipped for any decisions that you need to make, because like we said, this next 4 years, it's going to be wild ride, baby. But let's wait and see what happens. And with that being said, stay empowered, stay informed, and most importantly, Jeff,
stay tuned.
That's right, baby. Stay tuned, everybody. Peace out.